"We're giving your dog away. Your niece is allergic," my parents said about my 11-year-old golden retriever I'd had since college. "But this is my apartment," I said. Dad replied, "We're on the lease too. Outvoted." I moved out that night with my dog, taking my $3,400 a month contribution with me, when rent came due and they couldn't cover it alone. I came home to my own living room smelling like lemon cleaner and someone else's confidence. My mom was standing by the coffee table with a printed rehoming checklist like she was about to return a blender. My dad sat in my chair, arms folded, eyes already tired. "Your niece is allergic," Mom said. "We found a nice family. They have a yard." I looked down at my golden retriever, 11 years old, gray around the muzzle, tail thumping anyway. "You're giving him away?" Dad didn't even blink. "It's for the baby, and we're on the lease too. Outvoted." "This is my apartment," I said, and my voice sounded calmer than I felt. Mom lifted her chin. "It's our family's apartment. You'll get over it." I didn't argue. I went to my bedroom, grabbed my dog's leash and his worn canvas bag of meds, and started moving like I was following a fire drill. 10 minutes later, I walked out with him beside me and my keys in my pocket, because I wasn't about to leave anything they could use as leverage. I was 32 at the time, and I'd been the responsible one in my family since I started making real money. I worked as a project manager for a medical device distributor in Portland. Not glamorous, but steady. My day started at 6:15 a.m. with a black coffee and a quick check of my calendar, because my job was basically coordinating people who all assumed their emergency was the only one on Earth. I had auto-pay set up for everything: utilities, insurance, rent, my dog's senior wellness plan, even my IRA contributions. I liked the comfort of seeing paid in neat little rows. My dog, Cooper, was the one messy thing I was proud of. I got him in college after my roommates convinced me I needed something warm and loyal to keep me from studying myself into an early grave. He was with me through my first post-grad studio, my first layoff scare, my first breakup that felt like a demolition. When my mom used to say, "It's just a dog," I'd smile and change the subject, because I didn't have the energy to explain that he wasn't just anything. The apartment situation started with a temporary plan. My parents had moved to Oregon from Arizona about 4 years earlier, after my dad's construction job went slow, and my mom decided she was done with heat and dust. They didn't arrive with a cushion. They arrived with a U-Haul, 2 recliners, and the expectation that I would help until they got on their feet. At first, it was small: a few grocery runs, an extra phone line on my plan, a one-time loan of $1,200 for a security deposit they promised to pay back when Dad started working again. Then my sister Kelsey had her daughter Avery, and everything in my family reorganized around that baby like a solar system. Kelsey was the golden person. She was also the loudest. She had a way of saying, "I need help," and making it sound like a moral test. 2 years after my parents moved, my landlord sold the building. My lease was ending. I found a newer place, a 2-bedroom on the east side near my office, with elevator access so Cooper didn't have to do stairs. The rent was expensive, but manageable for me alone. Then Dad said, "If we could just stay with you for a few months, we could save." I made a spreadsheet. I always make a spreadsheet. I wrote out the numbers: rent, parking, utilities, pet rent, and what I could realistically cover without touching my emergency fund. I told them I'd pay the rent and they could cover groceries and utilities while they got settled. Then they asked if they should be official on the lease just in case, because Dad's credit was better than mine, which it wasn't, and landlords like stability. I said yes because I was tired, and because I thought having them on paper would make them act more careful, not more entitled. The first month went fine. The second month, my mom started buying house things without asking: new curtains, a lamp, a decorative mirror for the hallway, and then she'd leave the receipt on the counter like a hint. The third month, my dad started using my parking spot because his back can't do the walk, and when I pointed out the lease listed one spot, he said, "We're family."
The real pattern, though, was money. My contribution wasn't a casual split. It turned into me covering the bulk, while everyone treated it as a shared resource. Example 1. My dad's car broke down, and he said he needed $2,600 for repairs or he couldn't work. I paid the shop directly because I didn't trust cash. 2 weeks later, I noticed the shop had only billed $2,940. When I asked about the difference, he said they found something else later and changed the subject. I never saw another invoice. Example 2. My mom convinced me to add them to my renter's insurance, so we're all covered. The premium went up by $38 a month. Then she casually mentioned she'd filed a claim for a cracked phone after she dropped it in the kitchen sink. She didn't ask first. My rates didn't jump immediately, but I got the claim notice in my email like a slap. Example 3. I'd been sending my parents money each month to help with expenses. It started at $800, then it became $1,500 when my dad said his hours were cut. Then, without a formal conversation, it became me covering what they didn't, the difference between rent and whatever they decided they could spare. In practice, it was $3,400 a month on average, when you added rent, utilities, and the groceries I ended up buying because no one else did. Example 4. Kelsey started showing up at the apartment like it was a daycare center. Just for an hour, she'd say, dropping Avery off with my mom while she ran errands. Then she'd be gone for 5 hours. One time, she left a bag of special hypoallergenic foods for the baby and said, "Can you Venmo me for this? It's expensive." It was $147. I paid it because it was easier than fighting.
Example 5. My dad asked me to co-sign for a small credit card to rebuild his credit, and I said no. So he got my mom to ask, and when I still said no, they sighed like I'd refused to donate an organ. "After everything we've done for you," Mom said. And I remember thinking, you mean after everything I've done for you? I tried boundaries in the way people suggest online. Calm talks, clear expectations, I statements. I told them I needed a written budget if we were going to keep living together. Dad laughed. Mom said budgets were cold. Kelsey said I was counting pennies like a miser. The flashbacks that still play in my head aren't traumatic scenes. They're small moments where I realized my place in the family. Like the Tuesday night I came home late, exhausted, and found my dog's water bowl empty and his meds untouched on the counter. Mom had been home all day. She said, "Oh, I forgot. I was on FaceTime with Avery." Or the time I got a message from my landlord about a noise complaint. It was my dad watching a game with his friends. When I asked him to keep it down, he said, "It's our home, too. Stop acting like you're the warden." Or the afternoon I opened a mail envelope and saw a notice addressed to all leaseholders about a rent increase coming in 60 days. I had never gotten those notices before because I was the one who managed the portal. Seeing their names on the paper made my stomach sink. It wasn't just help. They were anchored in my housing like barnacles. When Kelsey announced she was bringing Avery to stay for a couple of weeks because her boyfriend's roommate had cat hair everywhere, I said no, politely, firmly, and that's when the allergy story appeared like a weapon. It wasn't even Avery. It was my niece's new boyfriend's sister's toddler, someone I'd met once at a barbecue, who, according to my mom, couldn't breathe around dogs. Mom said Kelsey wanted to come over more often, and it would just be kinder if Cooper was with someone who can give him what he needs. I asked for a doctor's note. I asked why the solution was giving away my dog instead of not inviting allergic people into my home. Dad said, "You always make everything complicated." Mom said, "You're choosing a dog over family." That night, the night of the printed rehoming checklist, was the first time they said the quiet part out loud. Outvoted. What they didn't realize was that I'd already been collecting my own evidence, not because I wanted to fight, but because I'd learned the hard way that memories get rewritten in my family. 3 days before the dog ultimatum,
I'd gotten an alert from my bank, and attempted payment was scheduled for my checking account for $1,180 to a storage facility I didn't recognize. It was labeled like one of my auto pays, except it wasn't mine. I opened my banking app and saw a new payee added, Evergreen Storage Unit. I didn't have a storage unit. I called the bank, and the representative asked, "Did you authorize this payee addition?" "No," I said, and my voice did that cold drop it does when something clicks into place. They blocked the payment. Then I checked my email and found a confirmation in my inbox, sent 2 hours earlier, like it assumed I was the one who did it. Same bank, same account. It meant someone had access. I went into the apartment's shared desk drawer, where my mom kept important papers, and found a folder with my bank's letters in it. Not my landlord's stuff, my bank stuff. The folder had printed screenshots of my account summary. The most recent one was from last month. Someone had been monitoring. That was my breaking point, but I didn't react. I got quiet. I took Cooper on a long walk and thought like I think at work. Gather facts, build a timeline, protect the system. When I got home, I didn't confront anyone. I went into my bedroom, pulled out my laptop, and started a file. I wrote down dates and amounts from the last 12 months, the rent payments, the utility auto pays, the times I transferred money to my parents, the shared expenses I'd covered. I exported my bank transactions into a CSV and highlighted anything that wasn't mine. There were more than I expected. 2 small purchases at a pharmacy near the parents' favorite diner, a $64 subscription I'd never signed up for, and a $312 Cash App transfer labeled with my mom's initials. None of it would bankrupt me, but it was the principle. They felt entitled to my access. Then I checked the lease portal. That's where I found the confirmation that made my hands go cold. A renewal request submitted under my login, asking to add Kelsey as an authorized occupant starting the following month. The request had been sent to the property manager. I hadn't done it. I took screenshots of everything, the portal request, the bank payee addition attempt, the printed account summaries in that folder. I emailed copies to myself into a new encrypted folder with a password no one would guess. I changed every password from my phone, then my laptop, then my bank, then my email, turning on 2-factor authentication for all of it. I called my bank and asked them to remove any device authorizations I didn't recognize. The representative read off a device registered 2 weeks ago that wasn't mine. I froze. That's not me.
They flagged it, locked my online access for 24 hours while they reset credentials, and recommended I file an identity theft report if anything else showed up. I didn't need drama. I needed control. I also called the leasing office and asked a simple question. If I move out, am I still liable if my parents stay? The property manager was honest. All leaseholders are jointly responsible, unless the lease is rewritten. Okay, I said. How do we rewrite it? She told me the process: a written request, proof of income for the remaining tenants, and approval by management. It could take up to 10 business days. Until then, everyone on the lease was liable. That night, after the dog ultimatum, I knew what my plan was. I would remove my money from the shared situation, and I would remove my name from any legal tie I could without doing anything reckless. I wasn't going to sabotage them. I was going to stop carrying them. I packed quietly. Not dramatic, not loud. I moved my essentials first. Laptop, documents, Cooper's food and meds, my folder of receipts, and the fireproof envelope where I kept my passport and my car title. I left the furniture I'd bought because I didn't want a scene over a couch. I took pictures of my room and shared spaces for my own records. Then I called a friend and asked if I could crash for a week. At 1:12 a.m., I texted my parents from my car. I've moved out with Cooper. I'll communicate about the lease through the property manager. My mom replied immediately. So you're abandoning us? I didn't respond. The next morning, I called the bank again. I opened a new checking account and redirected my paycheck deposit. I removed all auto pays from the old account. I set the old account to manual only and moved the remaining balance out. I didn't close it yet because I wanted a clean record for any dispute. Then I called my credit card company and removed my parents as authorized users.
something I'd added temporarily when Dad said he needed it for gas. The representative read back the address tied to the card, my apartment, not my new mailing address. I updated that too. By noon, I had a consultation scheduled with a tenant rights attorney. It wasn't about evicting anyone, it was about making sure I didn't make a mistake that could follow me for years. The attorney, calm, matter of fact, told me to do everything in writing. If you pay another month, it implies consent, she said. If you want out, you need a paper trail. So I sent a formal email to the property manager requesting a lease modification, removing myself as of the next rent cycle. I attached proof that I'd vacated, a written statement, my new mailing address, and a copy of the moving company receipt for a small storage locker I'd rented for my things. I didn't mention the dog. I didn't mention the betrayal. I kept it procedural. The property manager replied with the same sentence repeated twice. Your parents will need to qualify on their own. They didn't. Within 48 hours, the calls started. First, my dad leaving a voicemail like he was doing me a favor. We can talk like adults. Come home. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Then Kelsey with her soft voice that always came with a knife. Avery keeps asking where you are. Mom is crying. Why are you doing this? Then my mom, escalating. You can't just cut us off. We're on the lease. That means you still have to pay. That's the law. I sent one text, one time. Please direct anything about rent or the lease to the property manager. I'm not discussing Cooper. My attorney sent a letter the next day, certified mail, signature required, stating that I had vacated, that any further financial contributions were voluntary, and that all communication should go through counsel if they continued to harass me. The letter wasn't aggressive, it was a boundary in formal language. The rent was due on the 1st. I didn't send my usual transfer. I didn't log into the portal. I did nothing. On the 2nd, my dad texted, We're short, send what you always send. I responded, I'm no longer contributing. He called. I didn't answer. On the 3rd, my mom texted a screenshot of the rent portal showing past due in red and wrote, Look what you did. I stared at it for a full minute, then deleted it. Because what I did was stop being their safety net. The consequences were theirs to manage. By day 5, the pressure turned into bargaining. We'll keep the dog, Mom said in a voicemail. Just come back. We were stressed. We didn't mean it. Kelsey sent, If you pay this month, we'll figure out a plan.
Dad tried a different angle. You're ruining your credit, too. Do you want an eviction on your record? That one was the only message that got a response, because it was true. While my name was still on the lease, I had exposure. I forwarded the text to my attorney. She replied with one sentence, Do not engage. We're working the modification. Let management enforce their process. The property manager gave my parents a deadline. Submit proof of income within 72 hours or management would issue a notice to cure or quit under the lease terms. That notice arrived on day 8. My mom called me 26 times in one afternoon. I didn't answer. I blocked her number for 24 hours, then unblocked it because I wanted to see what they were trying. I turned her texts into a record, not a conversation. 2 weeks later, the lease modification was denied. My parents couldn't qualify without my income. Management offered them 2 options: find a cosigner, not me, or move out at the end of the month. That was when my dad showed up at my office. He waited in the lobby like a man who expected the world to let him in. My receptionist messaged me. Your father is here. He says it's urgent. I walked down, met him by the glass doors, and kept my voice level. This isn't the place, I said. He looked older than I remembered, but his posture was the same. You have to fix this, he said. You can't do this to your mother. I didn't do anything, I said. You chose this. His face tightened. You're really gonna throw us out over a dog? I'm not throwing you out, I said. The landlord is. I moved out. I stopped paying. That's it. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore, which was fine. I didn't recognize the version of him that thought he could vote my dog out of my life. He left without another word. Update. 3 months later. My parents didn't get evicted technically.
They moved out before the final deadline and into a smaller two-bedroom in a complex farther out where the rent was lower. They had to pay a higher deposit because of the late notice on the old lease, $2,900, according to the email my mom accidentally CC'd me on when she complained to the property manager. Kelsey didn't move in with them like she'd planned. She went back to her boyfriend's place and started sending my mom long texts about being unsupported. The bank investigation closed two small disputed charges in my favor, $64 and $312, after I provided proof I wasn't the one who authorized them. They didn't call it fraud in the letter, but they reversed the amounts and advised me to keep my accounts separate. I printed the letter and added it to my folder anyway. My parents tried twice to schedule a family meeting. The first time, my mom sent a group chat message, "We need to clear the air." I left the chat without replying. The second time, my dad emailed me a list of things you owe us, including a line item for emotional distress. I forwarded it to my attorney and didn't respond. Cooper adjusted faster than I did. He loved my friend's backyard during that first week, and when I found a new one-bedroom with a small patio, he claimed it like he'd been waiting for it. Final update, 6 months later. I signed a new lease in my name only. I paid the deposit, $1,250, without asking anyone for help, and when the leasing agent asked if anyone else needed to be on the paperwork, I smiled and said, no, just me. My credit report stayed clean. No eviction, no collections, no surprises. The old lease account showed as closed with a zero balance after my parents moved out and settled their final fees. I kept the email confirmation as proof and put it in the same folder as everything else because I don't trust that my family will remember it accurately if they ever need a villain again. My relationship with my parents became smaller. We spoke twice on the phone in 6 months. The conversations were polite and shallow, like talking to coworkers you don't trust. Kelsey stopped texting after I didn't respond to her last message asking if I could help with Avery's preschool registration fee for $480. I left it on read. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. Last week, I found the printed rehoming checklist in a box I'd accidentally taken from the apartment, a stack of papers my mom must have left behind. I didn't shred it in anger. I didn't mail it back with a note. I just folded it once, put it in my sealed folder, and slid it into the back of my closet where I keep documents I never want to need but refuse to forget. That night, Cooper slept with my foot like he always had. In the morning, I deleted a recurring calendar reminder labeled "Send Rent Split" and watched the screen go blank. It was a small thing, a tiny square disappearing, but it felt like a door closing the way it's supposed to, quietly, firmly, and on my terms. As the author, I'm on the narrator's side, and not because a dog matters more than family, but because a basic rule of respect was broken. In your home, no one gets to vote on what you love or what you should sacrifice. Her parents and sister acted like her stability was a shared resource, not the result of her work, her stress, and her responsibility. The most alarming part wasn't even the rehoming checklist. It was the access, bank accounts, the lease portal, new payees added without permission. That's not "we're family." That's a dangerous habit of crossing boundaries and calling it normal. The lesson is simple. Help needs limits, and temporary needs a deadline. Keep housing and money transparent and protected. Separate accounts, strong passwords, written agreements. And if your value to relatives only appears when your payments due, that's a signal not to argue louder, but to quietly take back control.